You from my autobiography entitled I Count My Life by Sabbaths, Part 2, My Childhood, Chapter 3, Rumors at English Avenue. To make ends meet, my father sold fuller brushes, and we rented out 4 rooms by the week. On Sundays, we went to Calvary, where my father led the children's church in the basement of the church's education wing. It was a routine that was followed throughout my life. Sundays in church twice, morning and evening. Monday through Friday, my dad would load his car with his wares, back out of the parking lot near the alley, toot his horn 3 times, meaning, I love you, and go house to house in Johnson County selling fuller brushes. All the weekly renters in our home played roles in our lives. The colorful stories filled my memories. For a long time, the front room facing English Avenue was let to a woman named Laura Studer. She was a skinny, dark-haired woman with deep-set, bright black eyes. I always thought she was crazy. Her hair was always disheveled, and her eyes glanced about wildly. She had a deep voice, and she always called me Steedy. It was her dirty habits that caused my mother to institute a rule that Laura's room had to be cleaned once a week for an extra charge. I'm not sure if Laura walked or took the bus as a laborer for a laundry business on College Avenue. Another rumor was one of my mother's dearest friends, Joanne Crutchfield. She had attended ABI while my mother was there, and she aspired to be a female evangelist. She had a deep contralto voice like my uncle's wife, Aunt Jean, with whom she was also a great friend. I considered her a great singer, and she loved me as if I were her own son. Joanne never married and ended up traveling widely. She preached many revivals all over America. Once, before my mother married Dad, Joanne invited my mother over a holiday period to her home in Frankfort, Indiana, where her parents Charles and Princess lived. That was Mrs. Crutchfield's real name, Princess. Well, as the story goes, Joanne introduced her mother to my mom, saying, Faith, this is my mother, Princess Crutchfield. My mother, not to be outdone, reached out to shake Mrs. Crutchfield's hand, saying, Nice to meet you. I'm Queen Urshan. The retelling of that story through the years always reduced them to laughing fits. On one occasion, while Joanne was living with us, she came into our area of the house and was standing in the doorway between the kitchen and the formal dining room. Now, the floor in the kitchen was a slick yellow linoleum. I always had fun lying on my back, sliding around the room, propelling myself by pushing off my feet. I pretended I was some kind of a locomotive or something. While Mom and Joanne were talking, I propelled myself on my back, looking up toward the ceiling, toward Joanne. She was standing there with a pretty wide stance, so I thought I would pretend she was a bridge and just slide between her legs. As I started to pass through, I yelled, Mom! Joanne isn't wearing any panties! You can only imagine the consternation as they jumped and screamed, and Mom sent me to my room. While Joanne lived with us, another event took place that I considered to be a pivotal moment in my personal life. She overheard my father and mother arguing loudly. Now, she lived in the top room that was above our living room, so anything loud in our part she could hear. My father was a violent man, known to hit my mother and occasionally savagely beating her. On this specific occasion, he was particularly violent, and I'm not sure what set him off, but it was after my mother had prepared a meal for guests. The visiting was over, the guests had left, and my mother had changed into a pink tufted housecoat. Apparently she had not had time to partake herself what was serving everyone else, and now she sat down at a small table in the kitchen with a dish of cottage cheese. They were yelling at each other. My father slapped the dish out of my mother's hands. Perhaps he didn't want her eating while he was talking to her. I don't know. The cottage cheese was dashed all over the floor, and my enraged father ordered her to clean it up. When she stood, making some kind of retort, He threw her across the kitchen into the corner, landing out in the laundry room. I had a little tricycle parked there, and she fell in a heap against it. At the time, I was terrified by my dad's actions, but also afraid that my bike would be all bent up from my mother crashing into it. As I've gotten older, I wondered what kind of wounds and bruising she suffered from that violence. Nevertheless, apparently, Joanne heard the commotion and called my Uncle Nathan. He drove over from his home at 1814 Orange Street and was knocking on the front door. When he entered, he came and stood in the door of the kitchen wearing a long black coat and a fedora. He was tall, athletic, and swarthy, and as my mom, my sisters, and I cringed together with Mom making her distinct, shuddering sobs, he asked, "Faith, what's wrong?" My dad was standing close by, glowering with his arms akimbo. To me, my uncle looked like he was a dark, avenging angel. I hoped he would intervene and beat my dad up. But what my mother said next, in later years, prompted me to write an essay in English Literature 132, my first year in college, titled, "Mother, You Taught Me How to Lie." Her exact words were, "Why, nothing, Nathan. Why are you here? Why did you come?" I don't recall much more about that exchange except for the fact that he soon left and my father got off scot-free. Not long after that, Joanne moved out. I'm not sure if she was asked to leave or not, but how else would my uncle have known about the situation showing up at our door? Throughout my childhood and youth, we were all subjected to violent outbursts. Perhaps it was the pressures of the time that got to my father. His role in leadership of the tabernacle, I'm sure, was threatened, but I'll never know any details. In those days, I was enrolled in kindergarten at school number 28. That was the year that was so foggy in my memory, with just a couple of memorable incidents that I'll relate later. I hope that you'll tune in for the next partition of my book.